Everybody, wait a minute.
Show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh man, let me get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh no. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh my goodness, what's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on 3 of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh my goodness, behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't gotta look, it's falling. Oh my goodness, this guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media gear. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like. All right, everybody, back again. Welcome back to I Mix What I Like here at Black Power Media. I'm still Jared Ball and still happy to be your host. So again, not going to take too much time on this one. The tributaries and details go all over the place. It's a very powerful article. Again, start off by shouting out Seb Solomon and the Doom and Gloom podcast. I think I am going to dip into something somewhat associated to this and related to them as well after this. So but let me just get to this. So I put the article link in the show description, and I and the reason I wanted to just do this real quick is because as I'm preparing for this Cryptoganda essay still, and Seb sent me this article, first of all. So shout out, that's what I'm saying. She sent me this article. Shout out to her and Doom and Gloom. And then there's some other sort of overlap with Seb's and myself that I want to talk a little bit about later. But let me just deal with this real quick. And as I just titled this, this is what is misunderstood either by design or by accident in the pro cryptocurrency world. This is just some of the context that they just don't want to address or cannot address as they make claims about what crypto can and cannot do, or will do in terms of making the world better. So the piece is titled Building the Impact Finance Regime, Nigeria's Civil War and the Road to Cyber-Colonialism by Raul Diego. I'm not going to get into the history that he gets into here about the Nigerian Civil War and colonial. I mean, is fascinating. It's deep. It's there's a lot here. I'm only going to use just a little bit of the a little bit of what is said here for the points I'm trying to make and how I'm intending to work all of this out in this essay that I just am continuing to struggle to do. But the context again is what Diego does here is use the history of the Nigerian Civil War as a precursor or as a foundation to help understand how cryptocurrency and the digital world and investment, and not so much cryptocurrency, but really more the digital world, and is being modernized to help to rebrand all the old colonial policies. So again, it's an argument that fits well within the one I've been trying to make, and that's again why I'm using it here. So the discussion essentially is about how what is now known as British International Investment was once the Colonial Development Corporation, coming out of London, expanding their reach into their colonies, in this case on the continent of Africa and Nigeria specifically. He goes into the background of how they created this conflict, created the not only Nigeria, of course, but created Biafra as a separate piece of Nigeria to create conflict, all to help divide, conquer, parse out the land, get the resources, reduce the likelihood of rebellion, and so on and so forth. So again, just this broader context of imperialism, of colonialism, of capitalism is just ignored in so much of the discussions around cryptocurrency, even in some of the cases where people want to make positive arguments from the nominal left about what crypto can do. So as Diego writes here, development was associated with reconstruction and rebuilding. A new, more permanent project had to be found, dug up, or invented so that the economic daisy chain could not be broken and the colonial tethers could remain invisibly in place. And what are those tethers? Control over resources, control over land, control over the labor, control over the territory, and so on and so on. Right, the daisy chain, reference to Cecil Rhodes. There's so much good stuff in here, but again, I'm really narrowing it down. That's why I want you all to. I put the link in there. I want to make sure everybody can read it, because for you all doing work beyond my own narrow focus on crypto and Black capitalism, there's so much to work with here. And again, the overview that I'm getting at is colonialism, imperialism is what is ignored, that context is ignored, the specifics of a rebranding old economic imperialist abusive policies, very much in line with what I'm arguing about black capitalism, buying power, et cetera, and so forth. Um, in trying to deal with what is described as a conundrum that is between the post-Second World War British official policy of ending colonialism and the unofficial need of the British to continue their colonialism. Uh, Sir Norman Brooke summarized the propagandistic conundrum posed by the hastily established agency in reference to Africa specifically. So they create the colonialism. What it was this? I can't. I keep forgetting it. The Colonialism Development Corporation in 1947. All right. Um, uh, to address the spike in disturbances and riots as a result of the economic hardships of the Great Depression. So there's so many gems here. So, for instance, I mean, this whole idea that you could create a new currency or a new asset class, ascending value asset class, that could help people when the economy is global, has always been global, and when you create pockets of wealth or accumulate wealth in one place, you're extracting it from somewhere else or preventing it from accumulating it somewhere else. So with the Great Depression that collapsed the economy here in the United States and beyond, working people in the so-called in the colonies of the West suffered as well. Anyway, so they create the CDC to come up and to deal with this conundrum, as they were saying, of wanting to end their colonialism nominally, but continue it because in reality they need it. As I mentioned the other day, there is still the tropical dependence. Anyway, so Brooke wrote, at recent meetings, there has been general support for the view that the development of Africa's economic resources should be pushed forward rapidly in order to support the political and economic position of the United Kingdom. Develop Africa's resources for the political and economic position of the United Kingdom. This policy could, I suppose, be said to fall within the ordinary definition of imperialism, and at the level of a political broadcast, it might be represented as a policy of exploiting native peoples in order to support the standards of living in the workers in the country. In this country, rather. So in other words, Brooke is recognizing we have a problem here. We're saying we want to end our colonial abuse of other parts of the world, but we need it to continue because if we don't develop the resources in Africa for us, the colonialism, the working people in our country will rebel. Cecil Rhodes, it's not mentioned in this piece, but one of the things I remember from Cecil Rhodes, who is mentioned by name at least, but this part about him it wasn't mentioned, is that Cecil Rhodes himself said the same thing. He said in the 19th century that the imperialism of England was necessary to prevent rebellion in their own country. The abuse at home, the exploitation of their own working people was getting too dangerous. So instead of ending it, they wanted to export that exploitation to the colonies of Africa and the rest of the world, as he said, from the Cape to Cairo, with that famous picture of him standing astride the whole continent. To prevent, and this is again why when Karl Marx, and I still think it was somewhat facetious, but when Karl Marx wrote that letter to Lincoln after the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, "Thank you because you freed the working people of Europe, who no longer have to compete against an unpaid labor force." So, in other words, the levels of exploitation. Now, of course, Marx was a communist, so he's looking at it slightly differently, but he's recognizing the interrelationship of exploitation. And that's what, from the colonialists' perspective, is being said here. We have a problem. Brooke went on to warn Attlee that if the policy were to be disclosed incautiously or incidentally without proper justification and explanation, the political ramifications would be grave. Fully aware that the very survival of the British pound was riding on the successful implication of the new policy, Brooke thus offered a solution that has come to characterize international aid and development policies ever since. It can, of course, be argued that the more rapid development of Africa's resources will bring social and economic advantages to native peoples, in addition to buttressing the political and economic influence of the United Kingdom. So why I wanted this is part one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this article up in the context of cyber colonialism. The argument, particularly as it's been made and continues to be made to Black people as to why Black people should invest in Bitcoin despite it continuing to collapse, is that eventually it's going to go back up. And if Black people own a good amount of the Bitcoin, once it becomes adopted as currency, Black people will be in a wealthy position. What they ignore is this colonial context. The British pound, as this article talks about, and I think I'm going to come to in a minute, in competition with the dominance of the US dollar after the Second World War, it was realized the British pound could only survive if it was supported and backed by the implementation of a new imperialist policy or a rebranded, updated imperialist policy of exploiting the resources of its colonial territories. So, in other words, Bitcoin or any other currency that is going to see a level of adoption to rival the dollar or the British pound or whatever is going to have a policy that gives its owners control over the resources that are being extracted that are forming the basis of the exchange and the global economy in the first place. That's what's understood here. The US dollar is powerful because the US military can make it powerful, and US policy can make it powerful by forcing people to adopt it. The British pound could survive relative to the dollar to the extent that the British were able to force it to be used in its colonial territories. If resources it was extracting for its own distribution on the global market could be, if it could force people to use the British pound or exchange the pound for the dollar in a way that's favorable to the pound to keep the market cap going, uh, um, to buy their products. So again, this idea that simply investing in an ascending asset value class is going to put people in positions of power relative to the state power of the United Kingdom and the US is absurd. And then, of course, it would require a similarly exploitative process, which I would think most of us do not want. So as Diego continues here, it is at this point when arbitrary concepts like the third world or developing nations begin to take hold of international economic discourse, and the tarnished vocabulary of colonialism starts to recede into the background, and British colonial territories rebranded as the Commonwealth of Nations. So this is again why I thought this was important for my own purposes in looking at the rebranding of Black capitalism, of buying power, of Bitcoin as a Black liberatory uh, 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 product or pathway. That all that's happening are going back to the history Diego was talking about here, which may in fact be the origins of what I'm talking about, the rebranding of colonialism post the colonial moment to make it sound like the colonialism or the imperialism or the imperialist policies are good for you. It is the Milton Friedman capitalism improves the standard of living for the poor. It's not creating and recreating the poor, it's increasing their standard of living. Crypto is the new revolutionary asset value, ascending asset value class that will help Black people coming at a time where Black people can get in unlike any other asset in human history. It's yeah, so that was the first one. Okay. Rebranded. So then a little bit down here, continuing with Diego, Britain itself was in a period of transition as the barely concluded Bretton Woods Conference ushered in the pillars of a new Atlanticist order through the establishment of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, more widely known as the World Bank. Attlee's promise to recapture Britain's economic independence by exploiting its colonial properties was critical to maintain its balance of payments in the face of the new dollar standard. So again, the new dollar standard kicks in after the Second World War. And for the British to stay competitive and to recapture Britain's economic independence, they had to go back to exploiting its former colonial properties, as it was critical to the maintenance of its maintenance to maintain its balance of payments in the face of the new dollar standard. So again, if you want to replace or compete with an existing currency, uh, you have to have a level of political power and military force and colonial territories that will allow you to compete or to stay in the game at all. Otherwise, you're just going to succumb to whatever that currency is, because that currency is itself an extension of the imperial policy of a more dominant power. There's a whole little interesting piece in here about Ralph Bunche and his time as an OSS agent, which could be argued to be relative in this context because so many of the black capitalist cryptogandists present themselves as working on behalf of the black community and are raised up even as black heroes, but their work, maybe not as official as an OSS agent as was Ralph Bunche, uh, uh, with a post OSS State Department career as well, but it is still very much politically in line. So whether they're officially paid or not, they are very much politically in line with helping extend Western imperialism, capitalism into black and brown communities, to the world majorities communities. And this is discussed in terms of the context of a Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee, or was it Arthur Arnold Toynbee, a disciple, um, which did remind me of something somewhat similar here. Let me just going back to my by propaganda Bible. But just real quick, because since Toynbee was mentioned, I thought it was relevant here to this point I'm getting at, to look back at what is said here in chapter 12 of this book, and about the what was called Magazine X. And Magazine X was what the intelligence the MI was MI5 or MI6 British intelligence referred to as a magazine that they created called Encounter, which was meant to be a popularly read and worldwide distributed magazine about the arts and the world of culture, but was itself uh, an undercover disseminator of Western anti-communist propaganda. And and they published the work of Arnold Toynbee. That was the connection there. And considered it, according to the intelligence world's Michael Josselson, our greatest asset. So they recognized as their greatest asset a magazine that would promote Western American, US, or at least Western styled capitalism as the solution to the world's problems. And that quote that I have circled there says, "What then shall we do? Stick so far as possible to the empirical facts, always remembering that these are modifiable by anyone who chooses to modify the perceiving mechanism." Aldous Huxley, Eyeless in Gaza is where that's from. So in other words, what they were, that described the approach to media in that magazine and to the work that I think I'm attempting to be critical of here in the cryptoganda sphere. The messaging, the propaganda is meant to adjust the perceiving mechanism. Then the facts don't have to change. Or you can share, maybe that's a better way of making my argument about, we can see more of the problems facing the world can be discussed today than ever, but only in the context of a very narrow frame, because the facts can be put on the table, because the perceiving mechanism, they can still adjust our ability to perceive and interpret those facts. All right. Anyway, I think that was actually it that I wanted to make from this article. There's so much more here, but uh regional. Oh man, I had a whole soda thing mentioned in here because they talk about the ethnic divisions, and this is clearly relatable to what's going on now with the anti-soda reverse hashtag backwards stuff that's so prevalent. In a pattern repeated throughout the process of decolonization, where ethno-geographical divides were artificially confined within the same borders to make intrinsically unstable countries, often excused as a way to encourage regional and ethnic competition. This strategy was pursued in order to facilitate the imposition of economic policies, preserving colonial interests without the formal colonial status. The same thing happening here, and it's kind of the same thing I was saying in the last piece with the whole Kiki Palmer Zendaya thing. I mean, it's like, or the soda versus the reverse backwards hashtaggers. It's it feels so much like this old rebranding of so-called decolonization. Yeah, but I think there's so much good stuff in here, but that was pretty much so no, that wasn't it. I need to come to their conclusion, the conclusion of this piece here. Come on, go to it. Did it just freeze? Hold it. Okay, there we go. Using terminology introduced to the capitalist lexicon by Ward and her acolytes, Move frames car debt as democratizing assets. Okay, so this is okay. So moving towards a digital plantation, one of the British International's rare investments in a local African startup demonstrates the fundamentally dependent nature of development finance endeavor. So for me, this is the equivalent of financial investment that we're seeing happen increasingly into Black and otherwise endeavors into cryptocurrency, whether it's the Black Wall Street wallet, whether it's the Jack Dorsey, Jay-Z blockchain initiative in Marcy projects, or what was the sister doing the Nija Brooks's work in LA with Hill Harper, kind of teamed up with Hill Harper and her organization's kind of blockchain WeWork setup look like kind of thing that gets investment and support from all these folks that we've been tracking here for the last year or so in particular. Find their support from the Western white capital investment world, primarily because they're able to rebrand a lot of the old existing exploitative policies and from their perspective needs. But as Diego says here, this example from the Move group in Nigeria demonstrates the fundamentally dependent nature of the development finance endeavor. So, by the way, I need to be more clear about that in my essay too. I need to make a note of that. The comparison I'm making here between what they're describing, what Diego's talking about in development finance, that is the investment into developing communities, is what I'm saying is happening internally in a colonial way with Black America here. That and with crypto in particular. Looking to develop Black America and close the racial wealth divide with cryptocurrency is a development finance endeavor. And this example makes, sounds consistent. Move was founded by Nigerians Ladi Delano and Jide Odunsi, and is touted as a shining example of direct economic development. Move is a souped up vehicle loan financing company that targets mobility entrepreneurs, aka Uber drivers, to help them lease or purchase a car for the dubious privilege of working for a rideshare company. Again, this sounds somewhat similar to all the variations of pay me or be paid to engage the crypto blockchain space with blockchain and crypto entrepreneurs considered as mobility, entrepreneurs. It's not exactly the same, but I feel like the approach is very similar. Using terminology introduced into the capitalist lexicon by Ward and her acolytes, Move frames car debt as democratizing access to vehicle ownership. Just like we're being told that investing in crypto is the revolutionary, this is the democratized investment moment with crypto and blockchain and other cringeworthy phrases so popular these days in corporate settings. British International leads the way for the wholesale rebranding of predatory capitalism when it describes Africa and targets and other targets on its list as having some of the world's most favorable conditions for the transformation of the economies and landscapes through innovation. By the way, he's got a chart in here. I'm gonna come back to this, but you got to see this chart in here of this was the same article, right? Damn, I might be thinking of something else. As you can see, this is a long and very thorough piece that covers a lot of stuff that I'm not getting to. I'm really reducing my focus or the focus of this to my myopic look. Oh, this is not. Oh, wait a minute. Is this the same? Man, I might be confused about which articles I'm reading. But there's a chart. I thought this was the one. No, it's not the one. There's no chart in this one. Anyway, there was a chart about that I was looking at that shows where these folks, how they identify what looks like a good, and it's all the same colonial mapping. It wasn't in this one. It wasn't in this one. Oh man, all over the place. Yeah, they talk about the Catholic Church, the Vatican is all in this. There's a lot of stuff in here. The multilateral colonialism model. I think this might be what British International divides the Crown's neo-colonial territories. And right, this is it. The British International divides the Crown's neo-colonial territories into 4 categories. Now, remember, this is the formerly Colonialism Development Corporation, developed that in 1947, is now British International. And they've broken down the 4 categories of neo-colonial territories into mature, powerhouse, stable, and fragile. And here's the list. Mature is India, South Africa. The powerhouses. And then they assess, like, so then they lay out how much of their involvement will go into each of these categories. Stable economies in Africa. Poorest and most fragile. And as he says here, the geographical regions could easily be overlaid on the 19th century map of Britain's colonial possessions, and similarly, its investment portfolio coincides with those historical ties. Okay, so a rebranding of predatory capitalism. Development finance is also undergoing a rebranding and introduces impact finance, which is tied and reintroduced as impact finance, which is tied at the hip to blockchain technologies and other cybernetic systems built over the last half century on the backs of underpaid, forced, and in some cases, actual slave labor across the developing world. The new digital systems will require no less amounts of coerced labor, and in a time when phrases like renewable energy are incessantly whispered in our ear to mesmerize us at the dawn of the impact finance regime, it is more urgent than ever to realize that we are the renewable source of energy it seeks to harvest. It is more urgent than ever to realize that we are the renewable source of energy it seeks to harvest. So after all my logic and my theory, I add a cryptocurrency so you ignorant Africans hear me. That's so that was it. That was ultimately what I just wanted to share. Encourage people to read that article. Again, shout out to Seb Solomon and the Doom and Gloom podcast for putting me onto this article. And I think and I hope I was is at least somewhat clear that the point is that the colonialism is still at play. The extractive need of those in power is still at play. and cryptocurrency is just another in a long line of attempts going back to the post, again, a moment I track in the Buying Power art book, um, to that post Second World War moment where the U.S. is looking to project itself as the singular hegemon in the world. This article is looking at how the British were trying to respond to their sort of second class relationship to the US dollar after that Second World War moment, and their need to be Marshall planned and to rebuilding after that war, and the and ultimately how they began their own version of the process of rebranding their colonial needs in the post-colonial moment. And all we're seeing, whether it's black capitalism, buying power, cryptoganda, and these arguments around Bitcoin for black people, is just again a post Second World War rebranding of the colonial relationship. When, as Diego says there, we are still that resource that they need so much control over and extracted wealth from. And this is just another way that they're in other words, the cryptoganda argument is just another way that they're doing this. All right, I want to do something real quick before we leave, somewhat related to, and I come up on this from Sebs because I think she was actually more than me caught up in some of this. So after interviews with Barrett Brown, I'll leave it here. Let me just say for now that Black Power Media and or me specifically, and then Black Power Media indirect, one or the other, I'm not entirely sure yet, were brought up as we were mentioned by this person, and Sebs was more so as Russian assets, that there was concern that we may be Russian assets. In a chat group that I'm not a part of, and I'm just getting word of this indirectly. So but the person that did that, and I'm not even going to mention their name. But I did look them up. And there is some fascinating and spooky ass stuff associated with that. This person is a PhD with an incredible CV. I mean, I'm looking at it now, it's 30 pages and it's not fluff. This person has done a lot. Harvard, MIT backgrounds, and a lot of it is in neurotypical and is research interests. The interests are described as, let me see, can I share this without revealing? Yeah, I think I can, because I don't want no smoke. I don't want no smoke. This is a wing of the academic world that I don't know anything about. I'm at the complete opposite end. But look at the research: language and speech development use in neurotypical and atypical populations, stuttering, autism spectrum disorder, neurocognitive basis of speech language perception, production and use, speech language prosody. And I had to look this word up. Prosody is like I believe a phonetic style in poetry, patterns of rhythm and sound used in poetry. I didn't even know what that was. Prosody and perception of meaning, social cognitive neuroscience of language, speech, communication, role of cognitive bias and personality factors in language perception and understanding, propaganda, disinformation, and individual differences, speech language perception and development in all adults and children with typical hearing and hearing loss disability, role of caregiver communications and young children's language development. A lot. And then again, there's just so much here that this person, but specifically, this person does work so, for instance, one of this person's projects where their role is listed as the primary investigator is titled, quote, "Making Words Disappear or Appear." By the way, another pet peeve of mine, something is not, something is titled. It is not entitled. Entitled is obviously, a sense of entitlement, feeling you deserve something. It's not the title. Okay, sorry for that. That's just a pet peeve. But listen to what the title, this project is titled, not entitled, titled, quote, "Making Words Disappear or Appear: A Neurocognitive and Behavioral Investigation of Effects of Speech Rate on Spoken Word Perception." The next one that they're also a role of a primary investigator: neurocognitive basis of disparities in clinical evaluations of speech of African Americans. Another topic of a project or a written piece: phonetics of African American English dialect. With references to applying with work that with being a co-author in a piece titled "Applying Pattern Recognition to Foment Trajectories: A Useful Tool for Understanding African American English Dialect Variation." Acoustic Cues to Linguistic Profiling: Machine Learning of Phonetic Features of African American English. Applying Pattern Recognition to Foment Trajectories: A Useful Tool for Understanding African American English Dialectic Variation. Investigation of acoustic dimension use in dialect production: Machine Learning of Sonorant Sounds for modeling acoustic cues of African American dialect. Investigation of acoustic dimension use in dialect production: Machine Learning of, I just, again, okay, so some of these are similar. Acoustic cues to linguistic profiling, question mark. Machine Learning of Phonetic Features of African American English. Applying Pattern Recognition to Foment Trajectories: A Useful Tool for understanding African American English. An analysis of the vowels in African American English, presented at the 19th Annual University Undergraduate Research Arts and Forum. An analysis of vowels in African American English, another talk presented. Neurocognitive basis of disparities in clinical evaluations of speech of African. By the way, this is a white woman. I'm sorry, I needed to be clear about that. This is a very white woman. Well, I didn't mean to even give that much away. A white woman. It's a white woman. Now, so that's who's doing a lot of work in, and I'm not showing it, but because I don't want to I don't want to reveal who the person's name is, but another thing that they were involved in, quote, "Maximizing the integrity of U.S. intelligence, development of optimal training methods for understanding accented English and identification of talent," end quote, which was funded at more than, well, it's listed here is funded from the Central Intelligence Agency, $348,554 with $227,071 in direct funding. So one of the things I thought of when I was reading that is, because I was like, first of all, look at all of this. So admittedly, politics aside, a lot of that stuff sounds fascinating. A lot of this person's work seems really interesting. And I'm always, and in general, I admit a fascination and appreciation for the academic world and all of its variety and all of its particular interests. I mean, there are people doing a lot of fascinating research in all kinds of things. But when I heard about this person critically looking at my own work, or more specifically that of either BPM and even more of Seb's Solomon, and this whole thing of being a Russian asset, the first thing I told I told the person telling me this, I was like, first of all, if you want to concoct me as a Russian asset, it'd really be easy, just with everything that's easily observably and easily easily known and already readily available publicly. Um, at least Belarusian, if not Soviet and Russian family. I don't, not that we've met or I know them or that they're still alive, but my mother's family comes from that world. My grandmother was put under surveillance by the FBI as a communist labor organizer. My uncle, my mother's brother, was snatched up by the FBI, which is how he learned that his mother had been under surveillance for his labor activism. Open references and support for as communists and socialists, just all on my mother's side. Then my father's side, same thing. Socialism, surveillance by the state, Black liberation, never mind my own work. So I like whatever I've said publicly. So I'm like, if you want to, and then thanks to Paul J at the Real News who blocked that invitation, the people who got the people that got Omali Ishitela's group hemmed up had invited me to Russia too in 2015, and Paul J just blocked it. Otherwise, I'd have gone, and they'd have had even more to go at me with. But it's so, but anyways, so that's one thing. But the idea that someone doing this kind of work with that kind of funding would be something like what? So I was thinking, what does that work remind me of? And it reminds me of this right here, this little book right here. I said, wait a minute, this sounds like the updated version of what was going on here. FBI's, How J. Edgar Hoover's Ghost Readers Framed African American Literature by William Maxwell. And a lot of what was discussed in this book is the goal to imitate William Sullivan, the legendary intelligence OSS, NSA, like spook dude. Golly, I hate when it does that. That's one thing I don't like about this. Go back. Oh. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, though storied name in U.S. law enforcement, capped its long struggle against African-American protests with a homemade imitation of Black prose. And it talks about FBI, well, then William Sullivan, FBI Assistant Director. No, not William C. Sullivan. Who do I always get him? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I keep confusing him with somebody else. FBI Assistant Director William Sullivan, a former English teacher. Please turn the page. Professor at a snug New England college, fed a sheet of unwatermarked paper into a worn down, untraceable typewriter, blah, 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 blah. The goal was to mimic Black speech for the purpose of surveillance and then misuse of that speech in propaganda or, as was the attempt in trying to get Dr. King to kill himself and writing a letter that was supposed to be from someone within the Black community to negatively influence the behavior of other Black people. So in just in that CV and looking at references to machine learning and CIA funding and Black speech patterns and like what's the goal there? By the way, it says here that the Bureau's concern with radical influence on Black America was obvious. And like they were worried, they were surveilling what Black people were writing to make sure they weren't encouraging rebellion, but also looking ways to mimic what Maxwell calls blackface minstrelsy in literary blackface minstrelsy. So it's like, is she involved in some digital machine learning blackface minstrelsy work? Right. He talks about ghost reading, not just ghost writing. A duplicitous interpretive enterprise that, like ghostwriting, might be grasped through its effects, if not always caught in the act. The Bureau never dismissed this writing as an impractical, vogue, relevant, as in practical vogue, relevant only to blacks or to bleeding heart Negrotarians. Anyway, I think I guess that'll be it from that. But that's the book I started thinking of, that this is, in the context, of course, is the Red Scare, communist influence over black people. So it's the same thing that we're seeing, whether it's in St. Petersburg, Florida, or in some of this, what sounds like some of this work here, and the claims against activists and myself to a lesser extent. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not even entirely sure if my name came up. It was either my name or Black Power Media or both. But that it's this idea that black radicalism only exists when inspired by communists or the Russians. And if it wasn't for outside agitators, black people would be a compliant, colony. Anyway, I just thought that was some spooky stuff. That was just, right. Blackface AI. Vern, back again, reminds me of a book I read called Cross Media, How People of Different Races Use. Yeah, except that books like that, I may have even read that myself, but books like that are more, if I remember correctly, or what I'm thinking are books that are more traditionally sort of communication studies, that are looking at the way different groups speak and dialects and all that kind of stuff. But the work that she seems like, William Donovan, thank you. I do that all the time. I get my agents mixed up. Wild Bill, right? Donovan. But but what I'm talking about, and what it looks like this person is involved in, Vern, is a weaponizing of those differences. So, now that it's been studied, how do we mimic those differences? How do we determine those differences? So for what kind of purposes? That was that's right, Ricky. That's right. Richard Wright's poem. FBI's is Richard Wright's poem about being surveilled. Yes, exactly. Right. Yep. Because Richard Wright, as that book and others talk about, Richard Wright and others were aware that their work was being surveilled and monitored. Da 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 da. Okay, word, right on. So yeah, that was really it. That was just some spooky stuff. Now, I don't want that smoke. Nope. I don't want that smoke. But honestly, the other reason I don't want to call out their name, because I don't know exactly what was said. I'm getting this secondhand. I've really only, and I just looked them up once, and I really just wanted to share the kind of work that they're involved in and that exists out there that I wasn't even aware. Like there's so much stuff happening that we're not aware of, that I'm not aware of, and tracks and courses of study that I've never even heard of. That and clearly, like, it's 30 pages packed of work that she's been on. That's it. Yeah. Yep. A white lady in Michigan, not far from Detroit, as we talked offline, not far from Detroit, and also not far from those militia groups either. So she's well situated to absolutely neurotypical, able. Yep. That's a good way of, I think, I don't know the work, but having, briefly read over it, I'm not mad at that interpretation. Yeah, no, I'm not lying. Let that bubble burst. If the actual bubble bursting didn't help. No, I appreciate that, Desiree, and I am definitely not worship worthy. Don't worry about that. Don't do that. Um, yeah. Paris review too. Miss oh man, I missed something good there. What's up, Two Black? Yeah, the general agreement and tariffs and tags, treaties and all that. Yep. Man, the chat always doing its thing. Anyway, so that was it. I just wanted to share a little bit of that, and that great article, and why I think again this argument around cryptocurrency being of any value to radical politics is, I'm saying, I'm saying, I'm saying, obviously, um, you know. Anyway, listen, good people. I appreciate you coming through live. Those who see this later, I definitely appreciate you as well. Um, I don't know. I don't think so. When I look at the CV, I don't think the credentials are exaggerated. I think that this person is doing a lot of well-funded work and supported work. And I suspect if I were to look carefully at her specifics of her job appointment, it would not. I'm suspicious that she doesn't do a lot of teaching. She doesn't do a lot of advising, and she has a lot of time to produce all this research and work. Uh, Listen, I, relatively speaking, I think her CV is thorough, and it really only seems a lot like a lot given um, that most of us don't have, or a lot of us in the academic world are at the other end of the spectrum and don't have. Even if I got over my other hurdles in terms of production, writing, research, or whatever, we don't have the time. We don't have the built-in structured time, given all the courses we have to teach, the low pay, the difficult access to grant, et cetera, and so forth. Nothing I have ever been interested in was going to get $300,000 from the CIA. um, you know, it may indeed be a precursor. It may indeed. There was a couple little things that happened, particularly after Barrett's last visit, that I didn't really talk too much about. That weren't that serious, but that could escalate. People contacting my workplace and stuff like that. Kind of like the reverse hashtaggers who were out there on Twitter tagging Morgan State University, trying to get me in trouble, saying that because I disagree with them, I'm a bad scholar. So it's like, so if you're not down with the reverse hashtag, you shouldn't work either. So I go by get my half of reparations check then, since you try to take my job. But if there's anything good about having tenure, being a full professor, and being in the margins, it's that's I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a lot of grant writing. It's one of the flaws in my own CV. And the grants I have applied for, I have not gotten. I think, yeah. And, and I didn't win that $1 billion. I'm not the winner, by the way, if you thought I was the winner of that $1 billion jackpot. I had hopes. We did buy a ticket. I did buy a ticket, and I was hoping I'd be able to fund BPM. I think that single payout I read was about 700 million. I might have taken a single check for 700 million and turned BPM into, I don't know, we would at least look like MSNBC or CNN. Production quality. No, I'm not doing any CIA work. Nothing that they would find value in. Anyway. All right, good people. I always have fun coming on here doing this. I appreciate you. I hope there was some value added to your work. And I'll be back tomorrow morning with Dev Springer and I believe some members of the Uhuru movement, if not O'Malley himself. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not entirely sure what's happening. But so stick around, come on back. And then, of course, tonight, you got Sundays at 8 o'clock with the Ear Doctor. Please don't miss that. I'm going to do everything I can do to get back about the get there on that. Yeah, do all the things, click all the buttons, do all the things, share all the things, you know. And if you got something to say,
put it in the comments.
You know what I'm saying? And I'll catch you next time here on our Mix What I Like. So as always, as Fred used to say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Again, only if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And I'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Thanks again.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.